Hi, everyone. Good afternoon to those tuning in from Europe. Good evening to those in Asia. And wherever in the world you're tuning in from, a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us for our Application Tips webinar today. My name is Camille. I'm a graduate from the IESE MBA class of 2016. I'm an Associate Director on the MBA Admissions team, and I'm currently based in Singapore. Together with me is my colleague Eve Ho, who will be managing your questions through the chat function. So before we begin, just some quick rules to make sure our webinar runs smoothly today. Please mute your microphone so there's no background noise during the presentation. You can ask questions through the chat function, so you won't actually need the microphone at any time. Please disable your camera so no one gets distracted with what you're doing during the webinar. And finally, please send any questions directly to the account IESE MBA Admissions in the chat function and not to the account everyone. Eve will be managing the questions during the webinar, and I'll try to answer them at the end of the presentation. And thank you to those who have already sent questions to us in advance. We'll be covering some of them during this session today. So here's a brief summary of what we'll be covering today. The webinar will run for about 30 minutes. I'll start with some general information about our MBA program. I believe that most of you tuning in today are already somewhat familiar with our program and are already planning to apply or have started working on your application. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on this, and instead I'm going to talk in more detail about the actual application process. What are the requirements, the different deadlines, what happens after you click submit, and some extra tips to help you hopefully succeed in securing a seat in our program. And finally, we have a few minutes for questions before we wrap up. So now to get started, here's a snapshot of our MBA class of 2021. In our full-time MBA program, we have about 370 students in each intake. It is a relatively small class for a top school, and what this means is that we have a very tight-knit community where everyone knows each other very well, but it's still big enough to have a broad and diverse network. Overall, we have 50,000 alumni worldwide from all our various programs. And because it's a small class, we value diversity to add to the richness of classroom discussions and to your personal development. A lot of the learning comes from your peers, and this is how you are challenged to see things from a different perspective. So you'll see that about 85% of the class is international, with over 55 nationalities. So you will be exposed to people from all over the world. Most of our students have on average 5 years of work experience, because in order to contribute to classroom discussions and to relate to your peers, it is important to have some work experience. The minimum requirement is 3 years upon joining the MBA, and we care more about what you've done in those years than the actual number. We also have students who have work experience of 10 years or more, so the range is fairly large. But ultimately, what is most important to us are your career goals, your objectives for doing an MBA, and whether we're the best school to help you achieve them. We have 31% of women in our class this year, and this is a number we're always looking to increase, as I mentioned before, because diversity is important to us. We do have many scholarships for women, as well as initiatives organized by our Women in Business Club, such as a mentorship system and a Women in Business conference to support female leaders. The average GMAT is 681, and I'll speak about that in more detail shortly. So the next question is, who do we look for? Who would be a good fit for IESE? So I'm going to answer that by sharing some details about my team at IESE. In the first year, everyone will be assigned to a team of about 8 to 9 people, and this will be your working group throughout the first year. You cannot choose your team. You have to learn to work with each other on all your projects. So this photo was taken after our capstone project, and the capstone is a consulting case competition where we work with a real company to help solve a business issue. So you can see from this photo that we were one of the winners, so this was definitely one of the highlights of my MBA experience. And in my team, there are 8 people from 7 different countries, all of us coming from different backgrounds. We have a consultant, a banker, an architect, an entrepreneur, someone in marketing, hospitality, and operations. The team is assigned to you and meant to be as diverse as possible to encourage collaboration. It is meant to teach you to work with people who are very different from yourself. So besides developing your cultural adaptability, this is your support group. We don't expect you to know everything, so there's always someone to help you. And you're also expected to contribute where you can. And this is part of the ethos of the school. At IESE, we care a lot about people. So the teamwork will enhance your people management skills, which are critical to being a successful leader. So in terms of your education and work experience, As you can see, there's no typical profile at ESA. Some applicants have asked, what if they come from a non-business background, or have never studied finance, or never have done consulting before? So not to worry, we have about 20% of our class coming from a finance background, about 15% from consulting, so you certainly won't be alone. So for instance, I studied art history in university, and I was able to survive financial accounting classes. So what we do look for is academic excellence, career progression, who you are as a person, and how you contribute as a student and alumni of the school. We want to make sure that you can excel in our program academically because our program is very rigorous. We want to understand what experiences you'll be sharing with your peers. We also want to understand your motivations, what drives you, and what you want to achieve in your life. And finally, where you think ESA can help you. While our students all come from different backgrounds, they do have certain similarities. They often relate to our mission and values. They really believe in them and exemplify them in their lives. Our students are very motivated to improve themselves, to make a difference in their communities through business, and most of all, they really want to be a part of the ESA family. So this is what we do look out for. And in terms of program structure, we offer our students 2 tracks, 15 months or 19 months. You only need to decide on your track in the first year, so you don't have to decide when you're applying. All students will go through the same core classes in the first year. You will take classes across all the different business functions to help you build a solid foundation. And if you choose the 19-month track, you will then have to go through a summer internship. It's up to you to choose what summer internship you want to do, and you can do it anywhere in the world. It's up to you to apply and secure the offer. You can apply for a corporate internship, a social internship, or go through the summer entrepreneurship experience that we offer. We have a career development center to support you in your job search. The career services team does several things. Firstly, making sure that companies are actively recruiting MBA talent. They come on campus to share their opportunities with you. We have several large events taking place on campus, and the biggest is our career forum that takes place in October and February. So it's actually happening on campus in a couple of weeks. We also have individual company presentations, professional clubs that help to invite speakers and organize company visits. We also offer personal development workshops throughout the program to help you. So for example, individual counseling, CV and cover letter writing, interviewing skills, communication skills, industry knowledge building. So there's lots and lots of things for you to do. If you choose the 15-month accelerated track, you'll stay on campus to complete summer classes and forgo the internship. So this could be attractive to some of you who are sponsored, who have family businesses, who are not changing your career path drastically, and you feel that you may not benefit as much from the internship. I think that this is a great option for those of you who fall in this category. In the second year, students have the flexibility to choose all your classes. We offer over 130 electives. You can choose classes based on your area of interest. So for those who are keen to have a more global experience, you can also go on exchange. We have 30 partner business schools all over the world. We also offer international modules, which are 2-week intensive courses at some of our overseas campuses in New York, Sao Paulo, Shanghai, and Nairobi. Again, these are optional courses. For example, I chose to go to Nairobi. It was an extremely interesting and eye-opening experience, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who is considering doing business in a developing part of the world. So students in our 15-month track will then finish classes in December, and those in our 19-month track will finish in May. So moving on to our applications. So we have in total 5 rounds of deadlines, an early round that has passed, and the next one that's coming up is next week on October 10th. Now, I think some of you are preparing to submit your application for a round 1 deadline, and if you're ready to apply now, I think you're in a great position. And if you haven't opened the online application yet, I highly encourage you to get started today. Now, what is the difference between each round? In the earlier rounds, we have 370 seats to fill and a full scholarship budget. So as the rounds progress, seats get filled and scholarships are awarded. We tend to receive the majority of our applications by round 2. So by then, we typically fill up a good portion of the class, and we will have awarded approximately 70% of our scholarship budget. So definitely the earlier you apply, the better. But that being said, we definitely still have seats and scholarships available in later rounds, but it will certainly be more competitive. Between round 1 and round 2, there's only a slight difference. So if you want to spend more time on your application or you want to improve your GMAT score, you can still target a round 2 deadline in January. What's most important is making sure you're not rushing your application or submitting an application that you're not proud of. For international students, we recommend earlier rounds so that you can give yourself more time to prepare for the move to Spain after you've been admitted. International applicants who apply in round 4 run the risk of not getting your student visa in time, and we've definitely seen that happen before. Each round will have its own decision dates and payment deadlines, so you can find that on our website. Please take note of that. We do not extend our payment deadlines, so this is something, again, you may want to take into consideration when you're choosing what round to apply. If you submit your application before the deadline, we will not review it until the deadline date. We have to receive all the components by the deadline in order to review your application. So this includes your GMAT score and your recommendation letters. If for any reason there's a delay in your recommendation or GMAT, please inform your admissions director and we'll manage it on a case-by-case basis. If you can submit it within a few days of the deadline, we typically will still be able to accept it, but if it's too delayed, we may have to consider your application in the next round. So what do you need to do in order to submit your application? So here's our basic checklist. So again, of course, the first thing you need to do is go online and create your account. When you start the application, you can save it and complete it at any point. We only receive it after you've clicked submit and paid the application fee. So you will receive the confirmation when this is done. There are 2 essay prompts. One is a personal essay and the other one is career related. And we can tell when your essay has been recycled from other schools, so please make sure you're answering the specific question. So one way of testing this is to have someone proofread your essay and see if they can guess what the question is. If you've answered the question properly, usually they should be able to guess correctly. We have an optional essay, and again, this is purely optional. So only write it if you feel you want to say something that will add value to your application and that we haven't seen in other parts of your application yet. We will require official transcripts from your university, so if this takes some time for you to obtain, please get started on this sooner. And as for the GMAT or GRE, we accept both, so it's up to you to decide which one you want to take. Since this is usually the most time-consuming part of the application, I would suggest clearing this as soon as you can. It's a requirement for most top international MBA programs, and typically it takes about 3 to 6 months to prepare, so make sure you give yourself enough time. Since our program is conducted entirely in English, we do require an English test for those who live in countries where English is not the first language. We accept several tests, the TOEFL, IELTS, so you can find all this information on our website. This year, we only require 1 letter of recommendation. And now, who is the best person to write your recommendation letter? We always suggest use someone who knows you well. He or she does not have to be your direct manager. It can be your ex-boss. It also doesn't have to be the CEO of your company. It should be someone who knows you well in a professional setting. So there's no point asking your CEO if he only knows you by name. It can even be a client. So just choose wisely. I also suggest briefing your recommender on what your objectives are, telling them what about the schools you're applying to, and this usually helps them to write a good recommendation for you. So what we're really looking for here is a different perspective of you and an outside voice. The deadline to submit the recommendation is the same as for all the other components, so you should highlight this to your recommender as well, because I'm sure they also have very busy schedules. And if you're applying for a scholarship, we do require 1 additional essay. We offer scholarships ranging from 10% to 50% of our tuition, and so this is anywhere between 10,000 to 45,000 euros. About 1/3 of our class gets a form of scholarship from us, so we really try to help as many people as we can, and average scholarship size is in the range of 20,000 euros. In the essay, please include your financial plan and also any circumstances that we should know of. For example, if you're supporting your family or bringing your family with you. What we're asking for in this essay is your motivation to join ESA and what you'll be contributing to the ESA community. So the difference for scholarship applications is that if we're not able to grant you a scholarship in the round that you applied in, your scholarship application can be rolled over to be considered in the next round and so on. So we do have candidates who are admitted in round 1 and possibly receive scholarships later in round 3 or round 4. So here, it's important to note that we consider your application holistically. Each aspect is important. We don't assign weightages to any of these components, nor do we consider any of them more important than the other. So when you put together the application, don't ask yourself what the MBA admissions team would want to hear. So what we look out for is sincerity, authenticity in your essays, and at this point, we're pretty good at identifying that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the requirements for the GMAT and GRE tests and also the language tests, as we often get quite a lot of questions about these. So here are some of the common ones. So our average GMAT, as I mentioned, is 681, but we definitely accept a range. High scores do not guarantee admissions, and low scores do not automatically mean that you won't be admitted. But to have a competitive profile, I would suggest as close to the average as possible. And if you're targeting a scholarship, a higher score can definitely strengthen your application. As for the GRE, we recommend a score close to 320. We do convert the GRE score to its GMAT equivalent, and you can find websites online to do that, so you can do that as well to see where you stand. If you've taken the GMAT more than once, we do refer to all your scores, but we will only take your best score. So it doesn't mean that if you've taken your GMAT many times that this will be viewed negatively. We also look at it as an indication of how much effort and preparation you put into the test. As mentioned, we will only review your application when we have all the components. So if you're taking your GMAT after the application deadline, please inform us or contact your admissions director so that we are aware. And if it's within a week, this is usually acceptable. But again, if you take your GMAT several weeks after the deadline, we will then have to consider your application in the next round. If you retake your GMAT and improve your score after your application has been submitted, you can still send it to us, but we will only factor it in if we receive it during the interview process. After we've made our final decision, we will not consider any updates in your GMAT score. And while we do look at the IR score, we review it together with the GMAT score as a whole. So we don't use it to compare candidates, but if your scores are inconsistent, we will definitely ask you to explain it to us. So is the GMAT or GRE better? It really depends on whichever you're comfortable with. We don't consider one to be better than the other, but some companies, mainly consulting companies, do look at GMAT scores for job applications. So if this is something you're considering pursuing, you may want to factor this in. Now, for the language test, when can the English test be waived? If you've been living or working in an English-speaking country for more than 2 consecutive years, or if your university degree is conducted in English, then we can certainly waive it for you. If you have any doubts, please check with your admissions director. English proficiency is required to succeed in our MBA program. Spanish is not required, but we do offer an optional business Spanish language program. So if you're able to pick up a new language, so you are able to pick up a new language and be fully immersed in the culture if you choose to do so. So this is, of course, very useful and can open up future opportunities, not only in Spain, but of course in many other parts of the world as well. It's an official certified course, so if you complete it during the MBA program, it is the equivalent of the DIEN or DELE level B2 at any Spanish language school. You graduate with a bilingual MBA degree, which is a huge bonus for your CV. But otherwise, most international students have the option of taking intensive Spanish at IESE before the MBA begins, and this is usually enough to get by in Barcelona. A third language is not required in our program. So what happens after you click submit? After we have received your application, it will be read by the admissions committee. And at this point, we'll have what we call a pre-committee to decide if you proceed to the next stage, which is the process interview. So if you're selected for a process interview, it will either be in person on campus or in your city when possible, or via video conference. So neither one is better. We have had many successful candidates interviewed by video conference. But if you have a strong preference for an in-person interview, please let us know, and we will do our best to accommodate you. Now, who will your interview be with? It will be with someone from the MBA Admissions Committee, all of whom are alumni of the school, or sometimes IESE professors. It will always be someone who is very familiar with the program. And what are we looking for during the interview? is basically, do I see this person as my classmate, as my teammate, or do I see this person adding value to my classroom? Each interview is up to 1 hour long. We'll be asking you some personal and some situational questions. There are no trick questions, so just be yourself. Now, after the process interview, we have an extra step that we take called Assessment Day. And what is Assessment Day all about? So this is a day that we invite you to spend with us to participate in some group activities with other applicants. Since teamwork is an important part of our program, we want to see how you interact in a team situation. It's an additional data point for us, but it's also a two-way street. So it's a great opportunity for you to learn more about the school, meet other members of the AdCom, and also meet your future classmates. As a school, we want to get to know you, so we dedicate resources to doing this. So Assessment Day takes place on campus in Barcelona and also on a regional level, so in New York, in Sao Paulo, and in Singapore. Not everyone gets invited to Assessment Day. It doesn't mean that if you're not invited that you're not admitted. We highly encourage you to attend, but it's not mandatory. If you're not able to attend, we will not hold this against you. We understand that not everyone is able to travel for personal reasons, and that's totally fine. We will make a decision based on the information that we have. And how do you prepare for Assessment Day? Basically, just sleep well, be fresh, be alert, and be yourself. No other preparation required. So following that, your application will be reviewed by the final admissions committee, where we'll decide if you have a seat in our program or not. And after you are admitted, if you have applied for a scholarship, your application will be reviewed separately by our scholarship committee. So we only consider you for a scholarship after you've been admitted. So the criteria is the same, except that for scholarships, the GMAT scores do play a bigger role. Now, does IESE give feedback on unaccepted applications? No, we do not. And if you are not accepted, can you apply again? Absolutely. We welcome reapplications, and what we want to see is what has changed in your profile since the previous year. So reapplication, of course, demonstrates your commitment, so this is something that can be viewed positively. And can I defer admissions? Our official policy does not allow for deferrals, so I would encourage you to apply when you feel ready to start your MBA. However, if your personal or work situation changes suddenly, we can always consider this on a case-by-case basis. Now I'm going to wrap up with a few tips. What makes a good application? So I think the first thing you need to do is really reflect about yourself and what you want to achieve. A good application requires clarity of thought and self-awareness. It's not just about your CV, your grades, or perfect grammar in your essays. It's important to communicate your motivations clearly to us and to be concise. This is why we have word limits. There are many stories you can tell, so take time to really focus on and highlight the key ones that can help us to answer these questions, which are, who are you, why does he or she want to do an MBA, and where does IESE fit in? How do I know if I'm a good fit for IESE? So first of all, you have to identify and understand your own values, what drives you, and what type of leader you aspire to be. Then you need to ask yourself, can IESE help you to become that person? You have to understand what makes IESE different, what our culture is like, and whether you will fit in with our culture. Our mission and values are part of our DNA. It is who we are. So if you have similar values, I think it will make your essay writing a whole lot easier. So once you feel that, yes, you are a good fit for the school, how can you display this to the admissions committee? First thing to do is to be proactive, talk to your admissions director, reach out to students or alumni. So LinkedIn is your best friend here. This is not just for the application process, but more for you to understand what does this investment mean for you, whether it can really help you achieve your goals. IESE alumni and students are pretty responsive. Generally, we're a very collaborative and tight-knit community, so don't be afraid of us. Please reach out. So I would encourage you to do this for all the schools that you're applying for. Apart from that, there are many ways to engage with the school. We host events around the world, and if there isn't one close to you, we also host many virtual events and webinars like this one. We also host open days on campus, which gives you a chance to really experience the MBA for a day. And so please try to attend that if you can. I understand that it is a big trip for many of you, so if not, there's really nothing like being on campus. So if you can make it to our campus apart from open day, please let us know. We can always arrange for a campus tour for you. And as for the interview process, how do you prepare for that? The interview is a chance for us to really clarify any doubts we have about your application. It's a chance for us to better understand you and learn about what makes you unique. So it's not so much about being different from everyone else, but it's just about being true to yourself. So the best way to be prepared is to know what value you can bring to the program, be ready to talk about that, and also know what value ESA can bring to you. We have several articles posted online by the head of our MBA admissions, Pascal, on how to tackle the interview. So I'd suggest looking into that, also checking out our MBA blog. We have several articles on there. And finally, this sounds pretty obvious, but please be professional. An interview with a business school is equivalent to a job interview, so dress professionally, please don't be late, and please be polite. And my final piece of advice is to spend more time thinking about your application than actually writing it. Most of you are very qualified, but you have to decide if we are the right school for you, and only you can make that decision. It's a lifelong decision. You only do your MBA once, and you're going to be an alumni for much longer than you're a student, so please make the best decision for yourself. So I hope this was useful for you. If anyone has any questions, you can please feel free to share it on the chat now. Otherwise, please do reach out to the admissions director in your region. We can chat with you on an individual basis. I would also encourage you to engage with us on social media. Here are all the places where we have lots of content. Again, thank you very much for tuning in. I wish you all the very best. We look forward to receiving your applications. I hope to have the chance to welcome you to the ESA family. Thanks again for joining us today.